There was only like 3 or 5 book calls for that week. You closed 10 deals. When you hear that, you're like, mathematically, like why?
Because it's like there's so much surface level bullshit out there and so much silliness that happens, cultural, political, blah, blah, blah.
What's going on in this world? Why is it so politically correct? Like, oh, this guy doesn't seem like he doesn't have the money. He's from certain countries, so let's just disqualify him.
You're right. Not everyone can be saved. Not everyone is going to be go-getter, but...
Welcome to another episode of the Dynasty Podcast. Today's guest is the Canadian Stallion. So he was a top dog for Seafood himself, Dan Lok, and he absolutely crushed Ryan Serhant's $1 million listing coaching program. He was closing at 60%. Interestingly enough, his first cold close rate was about 20-25%, which isn't terrible. But with his follow-up system, he was closing at a total of 60%. So he was actually closing more from follow-ups than the one cold close himself. So we're gonna pick his brain today. Will Odhams, welcome to the show.
Hey Brian, thanks for having me. Good to be here. Excited to help out and have some fun.
For sure, man. So you sold for Seafood. So what was it like selling for Seafood?
That was a long time ago. Holy.
Yeah.
I think what I liked about that process looking back is that there wasn't a large reliance on a script. So it really made you have to listen well and figure out actually how to understand people. Like, well, at least that's what I got from it. It was like, I had a bit of a framework, but I realized in order to close people, like I actually had to really ask better questions and come up with them on my own. And so that's kind of what allowed to like a lot of experimentation and pattern recognition of what actually allowed to cut through and connect with people genuinely as well.
Right. Okay. So you were there. Did you have to move any Iron Man statues? Or did you see that in real life?
Yeah, no, I was never that, deep into the Matrix that much, but no, I never worked for him that directly, but I was sales at one point.
It's crazy. I just heard stories of like his, what is it called? Like the closers in black, the masterminds. And then you go there and then he has such a cult, godlike presence that he pitches from stage. And he's like, all right, go to the back of the room and sign up. And then if the card got declined, people like start crying, like tears. Is that real stories? Like what happened?
He's a very talented back of the room or like state platform closer, like very good at copywriting, very good at frame control, very good at presenting and putting it all together. It gets people in the right emotional state. So like if you almost study it, like as from a business mindset, like it's very interesting watching it all happen in real time. Realizing you're also part of the mix as well.
Right. So you were there, and then later on, you got recruited by Sales Sniper, and then you started selling a Serhant. Like, what was that? Who poached you, or like, what happened?
No, like I was kind of in between accounts at one point, and then I actually, Matt and I connected on Facebook, and I thought he actually had his own account, but turns out he was selling a fitness account, and he was asking like, hey, like, do you think you could close? And I actually reached out to him around the fact that I was like, how are you closing at such a high percentage? Because in my community at the time, I was regarded as like pretty good. I was closing at 20 to 30% and others weren't. So I was like, oh, that's pretty good. And I thought it was hilarious because I was making more money than I had before, having 7 out of 10 people say no to me. I was like, this is great news, right?
Yeah.
Like I only get up and better from here. But I wanted to understand it's like, oh, there's other levels to this game. And Matt's like, oh, you've been obviously closing deals, but like there's stuff I can teach you to actually enhance the skill set. And that's when Marco and I started up on a small, it was a pretty large fitness account. So it was Coach's Cartel. And like that became kind of like a running joke because a lot of people had to farm the leads out of there at one point. But so we did fitness sales for a large part of it. And then I got on Ryan Serhant. I brought that account actually to Sales Sniper.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay. So you started there, and then obviously selling realtors is interesting because, dude, nobody likes selling to realtors just because there's such a... If someone sold realtors, they know how slippery they are, how vague they are, how inflated. If you're a realtor, just tell your friends to stop being vague. But they have like this inflated sense of ego for no reason. So what was that experience like? You're selling like fitness and then you got into the account, like you have these like vague slippery people. What was that experience like?
I think you have to learn how to work with people's egos and how to hold people accountable to different reasons. Cause like when you're like real estate agents are also sales professionals as well.
Yeah.
And so when you realize that you're like, because you've sold to sales professionals, right?
Oh, yeah.
When you realize that they're aware that you're playing the game, it's like you have to then play it differently or better or more uniquely so that it ends up becoming a different game that they actually buy into, right? And so that's where different strategies came from, and I would use some of their tactics like for them. So it's like, I would send gift cards, like they would send gift cards to their clients. So like I would mirror a lot of the stuff that they were used to, so that like I could start kind of getting underneath like the influence zone, right? And so that was one thing. You know, other things is just learning how to be persistent. You have to realize part of the reason I think on that account specifically why, let's say, one call closing was more challenging is because if you look at the avatar you're selling to, typically you don't one call close a house, you know?
Right.
So like you go in, they look at the contracts, then there's this, then there's negotiations, like, so they're used to a longer sales cycle. So for them, yes, it's about making a effective decision, but they're used to being able to then review the contract, do the thing, and then follow up with you. So as long as you kind of buy into their world, then you can create frameworks that actually work. So like a lot of my closes would come on call 2 or 3. So it's not like I just let all of them go out for like 6 months at a time,
Right.
but it's like I'd really control that like landing zone so that I would have predictability over that second call and third call cadence structure as well.
Yeah, no, that's money how you're using what they're used to that. Because when I was selling on 7th level too, I sold to realtors. That was probably like the third biggest avatar I was dealing with. And there's also B2B SaaS people where because they're used to that kind of selling environment. They think that them taking time to like have another call, that's normal to them, right? Like buying on the first, because like that's what they do with their people. But if you can walk back, it's really interesting what they do. Like you're doing what they're doing, which is if they because they send gift cards to their people, you send gift cards to them. So what are some other examples where you're kind of using those kind of creative ways in order to close more deals and build those relationships?
I would say one thing that comes to mind is being more like tapped into what's happening in local areas. For example, I would talk to a lot of people from the Florida, Miami region, a lot of people obviously in New York. And like you kind of have these hubs, obviously in major cities where a lot of real estate agents would end up coming through. And so I'd keep more tabs on what was happening with sports teams and also like local events, as well as unfortunately natural disasters, because they like Florida got hit hard when I was working on that account for 3 years.
Right.
Like there's hurricanes and stuff, and so using those types of like real events and natural things, it just made your following up more real and more effective. Like you actually have a pulse, and so therefore you can kind of stay in the fight a little bit differently. So I do a lot of things like that. It's almost like in some cases, it's like you don't want to get friend zoned, but you do want to be regarded as someone that they'd actually like care to respond to, opposed to, oh, it's just the guy that's reaching out or pestering me again. Like you want to avoid that vibe. So I'm not saying you can't be strong framed. I'm not saying you can't objection handle and, go for the close, but they need to have this like respect of you being more of like a trusted advisor, or you actually just being someone that they enjoy interacting with. So if every conversation is serious, that's not going to work either, right? So that's what I'm saying, like sending things that are humorous or relevant to where they live, or the fact that they have like kids or things like that. Like a classic one that I always used to use is like when people would cancel on me because they were sick, I would send them like my favorite cold remedy and things that I would like do. And like little things like that, because never forget that they're just another human going through time and space. So like they're not different than you. Like you've go through little valleys and peaks. It's like recognize that you can put the shoe on the other foot and then just get creative from there. Like if I was to receive a random message, would I actually read any further? Right? Like it's like the next line. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think one thing that I like what you do is that doesn't matter what the situation is, you're just so chill, like you're chill like a cucumber. You're like this, like happiest salesperson I've seen in my life. You're just like, yeah, I don't know if it's a Canadian thing. You're just like, yeah, like what's going on? You know what I mean? So does it come to you naturally? Because some salespeople get frustrated, you know what I mean? When people ghost them or when they get an objection. So did you ever experience that, or did you cultivate it? How did that work?
Well, of course, like it is like an emotional intelligence and maturity, but you actually have to think about it, like step outside the box for a second, like you becoming emotionally invested, you becoming more attached, you getting reactive is getting you further away from the objective that you want, which is to close the deal anyway. So like the fact that you're having that is actually extra noise. So you learn how to kind of remove that from the scenario. And then secondly, like, I don't know, like I genuinely just enjoy chatting with people, like, and communicating. That's why, like, when I found out like 7 years ago that I could get paid to talk with people all over the world about what their goals are, I'm like, this is crazy. You're kidding me, right? Like, I genuinely like, I come from a personal training coaching background. Like, I genuinely like having like real conversations that matter. So when I'm having that, like, what's the need to be like upset? You're like, yeah, you're right. I am happy. I am chill because I'm doing what I enjoy. Plus the ball, like the game is still afoot, right? So like the reason why it's also you need to stay chill is like, as long as you don't burn the bridge, there is a very strong probability that over time, the majority of these leads are going to close, like over 50%. So that means 1 in 2 people I speak with on the first call eventually are going to close. So it's like, now you just have to like take care of your garden and let everything slowly cultivate, as long as you don't rip things up all the time. There's no not to chill around that as well.
Right. Would you consider yourself an extrovert?
I would say probably more of a dominant extrovert, but I think there is a term called ambivert because I definitely appreciate solitude and time to like just my own thoughts. I have a lot of them, so like allowing them to spread out and getting out in nature and stuff and just being away is also where I draw energy from. Crowding around people and stuff, that's obviously lights me up and brings up different sides of my personality, I guess.
Yeah. Vancouver's a good place to do that. In Dubai, we have like no nature, so that makes sense.
It's upsetting. Like, see, that's why I think I'd only visit. I don't know if I could live there. Like, I like being able to drive 10-15 minutes and be literally in the forest. Like, there's something precious about that for me.
Yeah, that's amazing. But what would you say to people, right? Because there's some people talking on Facebook and they're like, "Oh, follow-ups is for people that just like fuck that, just one call close people." So what would you say to that?
Absolutely. Like, this is the thing is like, I think sometimes the message gets misconstrued. Like, I never said don't try and go for the close on the first call. Like, this is not an attitude that I'm just going to be chill on and like just let everyone say whatever they want to me. Of course, like on the first interaction, my responsibility is to lead them through that conversation. And if the natural conclusion is that they're committed to doing something, then we figure out how to make that happen. But if after all of your objection handling and everything doesn't go the way that we hoped it would for one reason or another, whether it's your skill, them, or a truly logistical objection, then I would say I think fresh and I'm like, oh, it's a live to fight another day. Right? A few of you have heard me say that before. Is like live to fight another day plan. Like at some point, I would rather not just die on this hill because I'm still confidently closing 3 out of 10, 4 out of 10, 5 out of 10. But I know that I can still get a chunk of those afterwards. So then it's like me just trying to like do everything to get like a $50 deposit that's probably going to refund the next day or something because I almost used tactics that aren't in alignment. It's like, it's not worth it to me knowing that in a week or so, I can probably still pull the pay in full if I just manage that interaction better. So like, absolutely go for the one call close. And on certain offers, I've had an extremely high one call close rate because the marketing was in place, because other things were pre-qualified. Like you need to look at it like a whole system, right? But like certain offers, certain types of sales process, certain avatars, certain sales cycles, they're just going to be different. So therefore you need strategies that work with that. And so if not burning leads on the first call is part of that strategy, then you have a series of steps that you can do to set up the second call. Because like when I say live to fight another day, what I also mean is that it's like a fresh game. So the first game is I got on the call, I'm trying to close the person if it makes sense. The second game, if that one didn't work out, is I now need to close this person on having a follow-up relationship with me. Because if I don't, then they're not going to show up and now I'm chasing them and that's just a bad status move. But if I actually now sell them on the idea of a follow-up and I sell it properly, just like I did the first half of the call, now I can actually tie this down, get the micro commitments around the follow-up so that it does actually hold and post to dissolve until the next call.
Okay, so how does it look like? I just want to preface that a lot of people don't know. Sirhan was a very difficult account. Very difficult account. Like the best closers on Sniper or other closers from elsewhere, they come with the Sirhan, they just couldn't figure it out, right? So when you say sell the idea of a follow-up, what does it look like? What are you saying? Like, what's going on there?
Here's actually where your salesmanship comes into play, is all the stuff that you know on the first half or majority of the call, the first interaction, is stuff that you then use into selling them on the follow-up. So what I mean by that is, by now you should probably know their objection. You should probably know their major goal. You should probably know their major roadblock to getting the goal. So like the obvious things, but then we want to then kind of wrap all that together. So typically what I'm doing is, once I've decided, okay, this is in closing, I need to switch gears, I actually kind of almost get permission and propose the idea, be like, hey, why don't, instead of them asking, can I get back to you, I actually lead the conversation forward and be like, do you think it would make sense for us to find another time so that you can do X, Y, and Z and keep exploring this? And so like, then you get the buy-in that they're like, yes, I want the follow-up. I'm like, great. Now, what I think would make the most sense, and then you get like the date and time, and then you kind of lock down a specific commitment. But what's with them is you need to make sure that there is an action that is going to happen on their end between now and the next time you're meeting, and that they are actually going to be able to complete that action so that the next time that you're meeting actually makes sense. Because I found I would be very good at setting a follow-up, but then a lot of them wouldn't show up. Or if they did, they're like, yeah, still haven't looked at the document. Well, then I'm like, well, now we're wasting both each other's time and you're losing that commitment energy. So like what I'll do is I'll make sure that I'll be like, hey, between now and Friday, are you going to be able to speak with your wife? Or is she traveling? Because that's what happened a lot with real estate agents, is like their partner was apparently never there. So then I'm like, they're like, oh yeah, actually she gets back Thursday night. And then you'll hear them actually think about, ask specific questions to get them to be like, you know what? Or even ask, when are you going to be able to speak with your wife? Oh, if she gets back tomorrow, well, actually, we have a date night on whatever. They're like, perfect. Then do you think it makes sense for us to have a conversation like the morning after, so that, you know, any concerns can, you know, be addressed then? She like, then you got a time that actually makes sense, because they, you know, that they're going to do whatever action or objection or logistical thing is going to happen. So you're putting something in the calendar that you both agree upon is a good idea, because it's tied to other things that are going to happen. And then from there, you're usually giving something in return and be like, hey, what I'm going to do is I'm going to send over this, this, and this. Do you think then you'll be able to do A, B, and C? So now you're kind of stitching, I'm involved in this, you're involved in this, we are together committed to this next date and time. So you're including yourself into the follow-up. And then from there, you're just triple checking around like, hey, let's assume it doesn't hold. Then I need something what I would call a follow-up vehicle. So what I'm looking for is like something that isn't about the sale, isn't about the program, but more about something that I can use if they start doing different things like ghosting me. So for example, I might quickly ask at the end, now that we've got everything packaged nicely, it's like, hey, any plans for the weekend, or what do you got on tap for the rest of the day? Like just something to kind of almost tidy up and close up the conversation. But what I'm really doing is I'm looking for something that, let's say they're like, oh, I've got, you know, my daughter's soccer game or ballet recital later on today. I'm like, oh, have a great time with that. See you later. See you on Thursday. Bye. But then if they don't come on Thursday, now I can be like, hey, how did that ballet recital go? And so like, I'm kind of reaching out over something that's contextually relevant. Or I might even joke, like, still stuck at the basketball game? Did it go into overtime? Like, you know what I mean? Like you can start playing that, because then it becomes more of an easier way for them to respond, opposed to like, did you get a chance to look through the agreement? Like I do use it at times, but you want to try and do something that is a little bit more natural, like how you would text a friend, like, hey, did you get stuck at the game? Where'd you go? Like, you know, it's like something like that is more, it's not buddy, but it is better received by the other person.
Better segue. Yeah. And by the way, we just magically transported June.
I'm an intruder over here right now. They consider the traffic over here in Dubai. It's massive, but
God damn it.
It is what it is.
No, but William dropped some fucking fire. So we're talking about so real estate agents, right?
Yeah.
And then those kind of slippery prospects. So what Will does is he uses what they do with their prospects on them. For example,
Oh shit.
because realtors are used to like doing like small talk, how did the basketball game, did you watch the sports game? Which like some people would say, hey, that's kind of useless, kind of corny, but that's their world, that's their reality. So that's what the Will does. So we're just talking about that's a smoother transition or segue rather than just going like, hey man, did you get to talk to your wife right away?
So it's really important to identify like your prospects or target audience language and just use it against them ultimately.
To a degree, or it's using it to serve what they're ultimately trying to achieve. Because like ultimately we're stuck for one reason or another. Most of this might apply more to a B2C kind of frame, but it's like you have a problem, you do not know how to solve it on your own, or you want to get there faster or something. It's like, so it's like you are using it against them, but it's like you're using it to serve them to get to where they want to go, because ultimately it's like they're just in their own way. So by you staying on top of the follow-up, it allows you to actually like keep reminding them of what is important to them, and you just need different ways to communicate that sometimes, I guess.
So it's a we frame, right? Hey, you and me, let's figure this out. There's this obstacle, so you can get to your goal.
Yeah, an analogy I've used before is like it's like an us versus the problem thing. So like I used to think, visualize that even on a sales call, is it's like instead of it's me versus you, like in a Zoom one-on-one facing each other, it's almost like us standing shoulder to shoulder, looking at some construction site, being like, how are we going to fix this mess? Like, we got to kind of like look at all of it. And like, that's why it allowed me like from that frame, I was able to be more like inquisitive, being like, what do you think about that? Like, do you think that pipe's going to blow? Or do you think, how long has it been that color for? And it's like, you can start analyzing it. And like, usually people don't feel like you're attacking them when you start asking really detailed questions that way. They just feel like you're attacking the problem, and you're asking for their opinion, perspective, emotion around that. And that kind of keeps that like tonality and vibe in check. But you can think about the same thing in follow-up is like, if everything's about a feedback loop, because what's important here, the objective of following up isn't so much about getting a commitment. Like very rarely do I get text messages being like, okay, well, I'm in, here's my credit card. Like happens, sure, but it's not the usual way that the follow-up deals pop. The usual way is like they finally text you back after something, and then you get on a call and then you tighten it up again. But like the whole point of follow-up then becomes, how can I get a response? Because if you're getting a response, the ball is going back and forth like a tennis match. And so like what you need to figure out is like, what can I do to get a response? Because keeping the ball in play and follow up is more important than getting the commitment today. So you have to change your psychology around it too.
I love it because personally, I like to be humorous. Like I just do like dad jokes in the call. And then how I translate the follow-up is like, I send them like memes every single day or GIFs every single day. Like, brah, or like, you good? Like these funny GIFs. And then they're like, hey, June, I'm waiting for a GIF now. Like every single day now, I'm waiting for it. I'm like, what are you gonna actually pay though? But I'm like, they're like waiting for my GIFs every single day and the memes also. And then like for example, 2 days ago, a guy was like, hey, 10K paid. Like, can you still send me GIFs every single day? I'm like, nope, job is done.
You hooked in the GIFs.
Yeah.
Yeah. But will you do the thing, I think you call it SNA, which is set next action steps, something like that. Yeah, can you unpack that, how that looks like?
Sure. So to me, like when I've done like trainings on follow-up and little master classes, it's like, and I'm stoked that you remember it. It's like, that's the most important thing. Like if you get nothing else out of follow-up, to me, and I have like a literally written on my computer screen here, is like follow-up equals set next action. What I mean by that is if you have spoken with a lead or had an activity with a lead, and you have not said what is going to happen in the future and put like a task for yourself or put a flag down or put a reminder down, the ball is dropped as soon as you leave that lead page, because all of us deal with such a high volume and number of leads the whole time. It's like, there's no possible way you can remember every single person and every single action that you're going to need to do and have it cataloged in your head. And if you can, you don't have enough leads. So like then fix that problem. But like ultimately what I mean is it's like, even if set next action, the easiest version of that is, let's just talk about the follow-up call. It's like, great, we spoke on Monday, we're speaking on Friday. So the next action is another conversation on Friday where I'm going to call you. Great. So what does it happen where a lead's like, you know what? Okay, thanks, Brian. I'm just going to get back to you. And they will not set a calendar date. It's like, great. Well, then the set next action for you as you get off the phone with that lead might be send them a quick check-in message 2 days from now. Send them a gift tomorrow. like June style, right? You know, like that's the next action is you are setting a flag in the future to do that. Or maybe someone's on the phone saying, you know what, there's no possible way I can get started when my kids are out this summer. Can we please start once they're back in school in September? Great. Well, I might set the next action for August 30th to call them, be like, hey, how was the summer plans? I also might set something in July just to keep them, you know, top of mind. Hey, we're up to this kind of thing, right? And so you kind of vary the response, but you are setting next actions. And if you think about it, an easy way you can do is go into your CRM, look at all your leads that are in follow-up, and show me all the leads that are in follow-up that don't have any actions on them, because that means technically you're not focused on them. You don't have a call set, you don't have a text set, you don't have an email set. Something needs to happen to that lead. Otherwise, they are not going to move closer to the go line or further away, but at least we need movement. That's the biggest thing that you're looking for in follow-up. Like, I love when someone's like, well, I appreciate your persistence, but I'm never going with your company. Hey, awesome. One, I'll ask for a referral. Secondly, I can retire them to the graveyard. So then it's like, great, one less person to focus about. That one I don't need to worry about. Focus on something else, because it's like you guys only have so much time per day to focus on follow-up. Unless the lead flows down, you clearly can't spend all day doing follow-up. So I block 30 minutes to an hour a day. And if I know who to call on that 30 to 40 minutes, it's like, then I'm going to have a higher chance of moving more balls, either one direction or another. Either I can retire them and then focus on the few that remain, or I can advance ones like maybe 2 yards with a funny GIF or a little something that they're like, you know what, well, let's book in something towards the end of the month. Great. Like, now I have another placeholder. The next action is set. The last thing I'll say on the next action thing is sometimes you set the next action and the next action is set the next action. And so what I mean is sometimes, like, I'll be quickly going between leads and I'm like, oh yeah, I need to do something about this lead. I don't really know what. I will just set the next action, set it for like a day or a week from now. And then when it pops up, I will deal with it then. And usually I do that because I am either busy or I'm not really certain how I want to play this lead right now. Like, I'm like either waiting on some other information or I want to think about it. But I will still set a flag, which is to set a flag in the future. And like, that's like that little kind of habit that you kind of ingrain so that things are always moving forward.
So when it comes to, like, for example, if you get an I'll think about it, like, I think people go to the other pendulums so much where they have to feel like they have to burn the lead in the call, do everything you can. Yeah. Like, how do you make sure that you actually go all the way and you do your best and objection handling, but not burn the lead as well, so that you can actually follow up with them if it doesn't work out?
Well, and I would say like the answer to that is more like, my answer is more to do with energy and like, I guess like something that I'd call like woo-woo, like little vibe. But like, to me, it's that emotional intelligence is like, I have been objection handling for 30 minutes straight and the person won't get off the phone with me. So like, why is that? It's like, because I'm not offending them. I'm not insulting them. I'm not disrespecting them. I might be challenging them. I might be making them uncomfortable. I might be like creating doubt for them. But like, as long as they don't feel certain types of energy or emotions directed at them, typically you can kind of do a lot of good, think about it, objection handling. But what you're going to notice is at some point, the energy is going to shift. Either they're going to start to get tired and you can just see that they're losing attention and you might be able to try and pattern and to rub them back in, or you're going to just see that like they're holding their ground. And as you might have some good objection handling reframes, but today they've decided to dig their heels in. And when you start to get that sense of it, then I'm like, well, that's the scenario. What am I going to do about that? And so then I decide, live to fight another day. Like, that's pretty much my next option. Because otherwise I do have to burn the lead. And it's like, well, that doesn't seem to make sense, because either I've missed something, or that dude's just being stubborn because he can today and he's trying to like control the situation. So it's like, well, that means he might actually really still need the program. He's just he's still in his own way. So like, especially with let me think about it, it's like, they're still thinking about it. So like, let them do that. If you can't overcome it on that day, then navigate that conversation, involve yourself in it, and be surprised that 30% of those think about it objections will probably crack in the next 30 days.
Yeah, because there's so many legendary stories that Will has. One being what was the longest follow-up deal you closed? It was like 1 year and 9 months.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
one
just-
1 year and 9 months, and that's so fitting with Sirhan's account because that's Ryan Sirhan's specialty, just like following him until either they die or he dies. So,
Yeah.
what were you sending them for like 1 year and 9 months? Like text, videos, emails, calls. Like, what did that look like?
Yeah, there's actually a couple important lessons in that like saga or journey of following up as well, like that I learned along the way, because it's like, one, that's awesome story to tell now, but it's also like when you look back at it, you added up like how many touch points did that lead have over that journey, and like it's a lot, right? And it's a lot of different types of communication. What's important to also notice is like if you were to almost have like time as the x-axis and like engagement as the y-axis, you would see that like it was a yo-yo. There were times where I thought he was gonna close again, and then he like ghosted me again, and then it's like I thought I got him on a promotion, end of the year Christmas promotion, and then he ghosted me again, and then it was like nothing for like right. And so you kind of learn that it's like that shows me, I'm like, man, like obviously not every lead is like that. But when you started to actually see that just because for some reason, my stubbornness, I didn't give up on that lead and they still closed, you're like, man, if that type of lead is closable after all of that, it's like that really opens the game on like, man, I really should just like give up on anyone here, because like there's so many like left and right turns that, you know, you can take. And so when you ask what types of things I was doing is like, one, you would go through phases where it's like I would intentionally try and work the lead, and then if I didn't get any positive reaction, I'd kind of like fade out of there and chill for like maybe a month or two, maybe just throw an email, throw them something that's not actually asking a question, just something valuable, sweet YouTube video, something, right? And then a couple months later, I would reactivate it and be like, you know what, I'm going to try and get him this quarter. And I would, you know, then I'd start calling a little bit more. I'd start asking emails that would ended up hitting that goal of yours that you wanted to hit for the second quarter. Did you sell so many houses? Did you do that? Or like, hey, I saw like on like, and that's the other thing is a lot of these like real estate agents pretty public, but a lot of people we talk to now have personal brands. It's like they're pretty public. So it's like you can use that in a non-creepy way to be like, hey, that's awesome. Saw you just like sold a thing in your area. That's great. Like, tell me about it. Right. It's like you can just engage stuff that is normal, just like a friend would. As long as it's not done in a creepy stalker way, you can kind of get, you know, more things going. And so there'd be a lot of times where it's like you're not, I call it kind of like playing tennis against the wall by yourself. Like there's no partner. Like you're sending out stuff and getting ignored, making calls and they weren't picking. And it's like, but then you're like, then every once in a while they'd come back in the conversation and you're like, and you kind of just like, it's a game. And like, to me, I would literally like when you asked earlier about like the emotional regulation, I would sometimes let my emotions like in a good way. So like I would get frustrated with leads. I'll be like, you know what? I'm giving up on you for a couple months. I wouldn't give up ever, but I would just be like, you know what? I'm pushing this one down on the priority list because he's frustrating me. I'm frustrated. He won't. But I still, so like I would just kind of move people around the map because it's like, of course, like some days I don't want to follow up. I don't want to do the dials either, as imagine all of us feel at some point. But it's like if I can find different groups of people to talk to, then it becomes easier. So like on Friday afternoon, like Matt talks about that, is like calling the referrals, because like it's been a long week. Call people that you want to have already closed. Upsells, like those are easier conversations. Like be as long like you can keep following up as long as you have different types of people to follow up with. You can kind of go with how your emotional state is like. So then you can decide, you're like, you know what, screw these people. I'm going to not talk to you for another month, but in a month, I'm going to call all of you again. Right. So you can kind of allow your emotions to dictate some of your actions. As long as you just don't stop following up, period, everything slowly gets done, if that makes sense.
Would you say your follows based on system or creativity? Because I've watched the Sales Sniper portal, by the way, and you mentioned not being creepy, but also at the same time, what I've been inspired also is if they ghost you on a phone number, let's say, or your call or text, you find their Instagram or Facebook, and you start liking their posts also. Or if they do that, go to your Snapchat, whatever. Like you figure out a way to be creative, you know. So I guess like, is it a system or is it more like thinking outside of the box for you? Would you say?
It's a system that allows for creativity, but the systematic approach is there is a little bit of logic and maybe like I kind of have put some psychology to one, different types of lead behaviors and different types of like how to rank leads properly. Secondly, the frequency in which I'm spacing out my communication so that there is like a cadence, because you have to realize like if you do a bunch of dials today and then set all of the next action for exactly 2 weeks to now, then 2 weeks from now, you're going to have all of those dials plus all your other tasks plus all the other things. And if you're busy and you have 6 calls on that day, you're not going to do any of it. So it's like, how do you actually learn how to manage it so that you just have like a consistent drip flow? And like, yes, you have to be working hard and just kind of maneuvering things around, but it's like kind of figuring out a cadence that allows like the whole ecosystem to churn. And then there's all the logic behind how to see the different smart views and the different like leads and collecting all the right information on the first call. So like all of that is systematic. The creative part comes from then, to your point, you're like, okay, email's not working, call's not working, text is variable, but I've texted a lot, it's working. Now what can I do? Is it time to be funny? Is it time to be helpful? Is it time to do something different? Is it time to hit them up on socials, right? It's like you have to start then, like that's where the creative, there isn't really a right answer. What I would say is like, this is where my ADHD takes hold, is like random is probably better to a degree. And so it's like, hey, look for the pattern, and then you're clearly working with your audience right now because they're consistent, and then it's probably there's an element of humor. So it's like, great. And so like that's where it's like you're being kind of unique and you're leveraging the creative side of your personality too as well.
So how do you keep track? Because the number one problem is that closers, especially in our high ticket industry, they don't follow up. Like when they get a no-show or like when they have time, they're just like twirling their thumbs and just kind of complaining. But number two, if they start following up, then what they'll quickly find is that, let's say they set tasks in the CRM, in Cloes, HubSpot, whatever they use, it starts to pile up, right? So when they log in the next morning, okay, so I have these sales calls and then like I have all these people that I got to text or call. How do you make sure you're still hitting all those people, keeping track so people aren't just falling through the cracks?
So it's a combination of like realizing that if you're a good sales rep and you're not burning leads, that follow-up hour that you block every day should be actually a more probable money-making hour than your frontline close rate, because you already know their objections, you already have kind of pitched them, they're closer to being closed than those fresh calls in your calendar. And so the psychology switch is every day having time for follow-up. What you're doing is the calls that you're not one call closing, you're putting scheduled follow-ups on that hour. So like those quick 15-minute appointments. So hopefully you're closing a deal that's just like a couple days old. And then if they don't show up, you're doing other follow-up actions so that you're just quickly trying to like clear tasks. Now, when you talk about a task overload, that's going to happen. So then it's about kind of being militant and kind of being like a triage situation. It's like, who do I need to address? Which are the ones that have priority? And then which ones can I maybe snooze to later on this week where it looks more quiet, right? It's like, and then I'll block a little longer time to handle those. Or that will start dictating some of your decisions. It's like, maybe not everyone can get called today, but I could just throw a quick value email out to them instead, so that at least I'm doing something, but not, so then you can manage your time differently as well. But then like the last piece of this is the smart views. The smart views help you figure out the prioritization of like who needs to be worked in your pipeline based off where they are in your pipeline. For example, if you have people that might close in 1 to 3 months, that's where they are in your pipeline, and they have a task today, it's like, well, yeah, for sure, they are somewhat important. But when you see the task that's for someone that's in your less than 30 days or less than 10 days, it's like, I'm obviously going to get that task done because I know where they are in the hierarchy. So you're kind of making judgment calls because you do have to manage your time and just keep moving out there as well.
Yeah. And when it comes to blocking time, this is what I learned from Brian, and I think you learned from Matt also, is when it comes to money logistic, right? Like you have a specific email in terms of how to be resourceful with money, have like 64 different ways to find the funds, right? And like what you would do is like hey, like you don't have the money right now, but what you can do is do Uber Eats. Can I keep you? Are you open to accountability? Like if the moment you give up, I'm giving up on you. But if you don't give up, I'm not giving up on you. So like you set the accountability that way, and like you set a call every single week to make sure that they actually find the funds. And it's like a good 10 minutes every single week. But as it piles up, like you're able to bring in the money logistical people actually, and it actually piles up that way also. And I've been utilizing that. But I think that kind of correlates to what you said also, is set times also, but action plans as well. And however you frame the call is gonna just lead to how you follow up as well. If you're being humorous, then you can be like, you can use humor. If you're like coming straight from like accountability frame, then you can be like, hey, the moment you give up, I'm giving up on you, but just don't give up. I'm gonna make sure that you do Uber Eats to make sure that you actually change your life. Then like every single week there's a task, and you're keeping them accountable every single week. So I think ultimately it comes down to really just knowing how to prioritize leads also, putting them in the right smart view also, grading them, and being very meticulous with your schedule as well also.
Well, you're spot on. And I think having the systems help. And then also playing the player, because like not everyone's going to respond to the humor in the same way. So, but the nice thing is you've usually spoken with this person, you've usually seen them on Zoom. You can get a kind of understanding of whether they did respond to some of your jokes or things throughout the call, or how they reacted to your personality, and also what they need. Because I totally love how you bring up the accountability. Is some people, a lot of what we're selling is a system with accountability and coaching and feedback. It's like, well, then start that process now and start holding them to a higher standard, because then you're kind of a champion of their goals, of what they're trying to achieve. And that allows you to always have like, that's that follow-up vehicle, like June, like what you're explaining. Or hey, you're going to do this because that's going to help you kind of get ready for this program. I'm going to check in with you over that. It's like, now I'm not checking with you over the program, I'm checking in over the thing that you said you were going to do. So it also makes that more of a different dynamic. And then it also gives you like almost like multiple wavelengths to follow up, because eventually, let's say they stop doing the accountability things. Now you can switch back to something about your program. Now you can switch back to humor. So like you can kind of play on different like wavelengths, depending on what's working, what's not, what starts to like lag as well. So you open up multiple things of conversation.
And we do have to realize that we're the first contact before actually talking with the coach. We're their coaches, honestly, in a way. So it's like the way how you set the tone, the way how you're persistent with them, the way that you're willing to show that you're not going to give up on them, is how you set the tone for your program as well. It's like this is what the program is. So we're not gonna me doing this will not move the needle forward, but at least you get to see what accountability looks like in the program, and I can back it up.
And like I used to using a frame of acting as if, right? And like you can try and like, so if someone's not closing today, it's like, great, well, I know you're not putting dollars across the line, but let's start acting as if you're already in this program, because you told me you're fully committed to changing your circumstance. So given that, between now and the next time we speak, what would someone acting as if you're already in the program, what would you be doing differently? And you put the ball in their court and you get them to self-select to their higher standard. And then you hold them kind of to that, right? In that point as well. So yeah, you've got it. I think the other thing is like that allows the follow-up just to go so much smoother, so that it's just more of a natural cadence, so that you'll be able to get more of these people who might have money logistical objections, or thinking about it. They just need to actually do a proper goal setting session by themselves and come to the realization that they know they need help.
Yeah. How do you go about that with the goals? Because I think you send them that thing, right? I think when you're selling for Vince Del Monte or in Sirhan, you send them like a goal setting exercise. How do you go about that?
So like, that's the thing, is it's got to be contextually relevant, like for your offer. But like when I was selling more coaching, I had like I called it like, you guys may have heard it. It's called SMART goals. So it's like a SMART is an acronym that stands for specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. And so essentially I had a quick little video that was like 2 minutes, 3 minutes long. And I got them, it defined what a SMART goal was, and then asked them to create 2 or 3 SMART goals for the next 14 days that we were going to kind of lock into. Because then, and it's usually a good exercise, because very few people, and that's what we're doing on closing calls too, is like walking through someone's like thought patterns to help them see a different side of it. It's like, you're actually, very few people have set SMART goals and stuck to them. like, hey, I will do this by this time every day, and this is what will happen if I don't. It's like, that's like, okay, like a very clear goal, but it also allows you to have a very clear thing to hold them accountable to. So I used to have like, yeah, just a quick little explainer and an exercise. And that's the other thing, is you can put a lot of these things in sequences. So like I can send someone my goal setting play, which is the first email, set the goals. But if they don't respond to it, like 48 hours later, I'll be like, hey, looking forward to holding you accountable. I didn't see those goals hit my inbox yet. Right. Like it's so like, and then you can have like a quick nudge so that, and then a reminder to call them, because now you already know, like what you want to do is you want to prevent people from falling away and just forgotten about, right? Because some people are going to do and be, very compliant to the plan that you guys co-created, but others, are just gonna, you thought you had a good plan and they thought different. So you need to have like workflows or things to buckets to catch them if they start falling away and doing what we don't want them to do, I suppose.
Yeah, 100%. And so some of these stuff can be automated and systematized in a sense that, let's say if you use Close IO, for example, some of the CRMs, is that you can set the workflows, which is basically automated email and or text sequences, where you send them the thing, and then if they don't respond after 24 hours, it sends them the next thing, and then also sets task, hey, call this person. The trap that some other people fall into is that they just want to automate everything. They never give them a call, but like that's another trap too. But there's also another time where on certain hand, like the marketing went down, and this is a lot of closers don't understand, especially in our industry, is that marketing inevitably will shit the bed. It's not an if thing, it's a when thing, right? So marketing and the lead flow will eventually go down, and so what a lot of closers do is like they kind of twirl the thumb, they kind of complain, and then they just like whatever about the marketing. So there's one time in certain, I think there was only like 3 or 5 book calls for that week, and you closed 10 deals.
Wow.
Right? So when you hear that, you're like, yeah, I'm like mathematically, like how, why, you know what I mean? So can you unpack what that happened, what's going through your mind? Because a lot of people be like, oh, I don't have many book calls. So what's going on?
Well, let's go through the math. Like someone who is a full-time closer, let's say they're getting, let's just use basic numbers, 25 calls a week. So that's 100 calls a month. Let's say they're closing 30% of them. That means there's 70 calls that don't close. So every month when calls are flowing normally, let's even get rid of 10 that are unqualified. So 60 calls are being added to your pipeline month over month. That's 60 new little seeds that you're planting, right? And so I'd been on the account for several years at that point, I think, but then the leads finally like went down. But if you think about it, in a perfect world, now again, I didn't have all my systems as dialed in as I do now, but in a perfect world, had I been watering those 60 seeds every month that kept going, it's like, it's only possible that certain number of them are just going to start growing and blossoming from the ground at different times. And so when the leads went down, I had just more time to then do more of the calling and the things that I got behind on. So then this is the challenge, is when the leads go down, I knew how to hunt, and I knew where to hunt. I knew who to focus on. I knew where they were in their sales journey. I knew what I knew who was like slowing down, who needed speeding up. I knew that stuff, so that it was very easy for me to cultivate that in a short amount of time, because I knew all of those variables, because everything was set in advance. So like, it's not saying all those deals were ready, but I knew where to find the ones that may have been ready, and then finally got them on the phone again and had quick closing calls, right? And then there's different ways of like, that's the other thing, is you want to play one card at a time. Certain people that are earlier in the buying cycle, on the first call, I don't tell them about all the payment plans, all the other things, all the drop sells, because I know they're not ready yet, because they're earlier in the buying cycle. So like, hold some of those cards back, because I know I'm going to need to follow up with them. And why play all my cards on the first hand if I know that person I'm judging on it is like, yeah, I'm moving them from a 3 to a 7. Great. But they are not ready to buy because they started as a 3 today, at least. Right. And so it's like, and they didn't even know the brand. And it's like, so when you can actually take someone through that, then you could hold on to these things that you can then slowly introduce over time as well, in that sense.
When you say 3 to 7, are you talking about the nurturing and the indoctrination level, would you say?
Yeah, so like, yeah, where someone is on like the buying cycle, right? Because sometimes people aren't even problem aware, or they don't even know solution awareness. Like they're just not even there. They came in somehow, they ignored a lot of the marketing. They didn't watch the pre-call stuff. Like you just deal with certain leads that are just like kind of, they don't really know. They're ambivalent to why they're on the phone, but they're like, oh, I've been following your influencer for a while.
Yeah.
It's like so that's what we're working with today, right? Like, and so you got to go like on a little adventure. And I'm again, like ideally most leads aren't like that, but it happens, right? And certain types of marketing, they just bring anyone in, so then therefore it requires a different type of sales rep to be able to take someone up the chain as well.
Because there's a culture in the space right now where I don't know if it's beneficial for closers, but whenever you see like a certain, I don't know, red flag where they're just not nurtured enough, like quickly disqualifying.
Oh, bro.
Like, oh, they say in the first 5 minutes, I don't have the money, and then disqualify. Save my energy. I'm like, what's going on in this world? Why is it so politically correct? Like, it's an hour book call still. Like, do everything you can, at the end of the day.
Yeah, well, and also to me, like I remember closing like a $2,500 program, and like it would be, I was impressed sometimes with the level of resourcefulness. Like, as you said, I had people go mow lawns. I remember I sold some guy who got permission from his parents, like written permission. He was 17 to take some copywriting course, but he like power sprayed and mowed lawns for 2 months, and I farmed him. And then he like, it's like, I was like, man, but then he went on like a couple K a month doing email, right? So it's like, it's certain personalities. It's like, they don't need to have money. A lot of us don't have it to get started, but we get resourceful, right? And so giving up on someone just because they're unqualified on paper, it's like, I want to at least get a personality check to kind of confirm or deny that application. Because like, you're right. Not everyone can be saved. Not everyone is going to be like go-getter, but like, there's a good chunk of people that, just need somebody to like, kind of be like, hey, maybe you will join in 3 months. That's the thing, is it doesn't really cost me much to follow up with people. Be like, they're like, yeah, I really want this. I'm just really broke right now. I'm like, awesome. Here's some resources. Here's some free value. Let's stay in touch and see what happens. And like, as they do, some of them will come back, some of them won't. But it's like, it doesn't cost me anything to like have that quick 10-minute, 15-minute conversation just to like see where someone's at, for sure.
Yeah, because what I'm seeing also is like, these people want to be so politically correct that they just say, hey, like, they post on Facebook, hey, I disqualified this woman in the first 5 minutes because she didn't have the resources. I'm like, what the heck is going on again? Like, I mean, it's like if you sell them well enough and you know that they are open to being kept accountable, they can actually change their lives, actually, by just, again, being sold the right way, really, and just caring about them, knowing that they don't have to live that way anymore, that they can be held to higher standards, as you said, It's like, where's this culture coming from where you have to disqualify someone in the first 5 minutes, just because someone said like they're not nurtured or they just don't have the money, It's just crazy, It's like manipulative to actually twist their arm and actually make them be resourceful,
Yeah. To me, I'm looking for like, I think Brian was asking like, why am I so happy all the time? It's like, because having like powerful, meaningful conversation is awesome, right? Like it's like, because it's like there's so much surface level bullshit out there, and so much like silliness that happens, cultural, political, blah blah blah. It's like having a one-on-one real conversation about something that matters to them and what they're trying to achieve. Like I'm honored to obviously like hear someone's like real stuff and what they're really trying to do and what they're willing to do to get there. Like that's exciting to me. And like, again, from the personal training background, it's like, I just believe in everyone's got like limitless potential here. So it's like, cool, show that to me, let it come out and see what we can do with it. Like we might be able to help, we might not, but at least like be real so that we can actually get somewhere different that we haven't got before. Like
it's coming from a place of gratitude, because like, just because someone doesn't have the money in the call, you don't like you want to treat everyone equal. At least for me, like everyone deserves a chance. Everyone deserves to be kept equal. Like, oh, this guy seems like he has the money, so let's talk with him. Oh, this guy doesn't seem like he doesn't have the money. He's from certain countries, so let's just disqualify him. Like, that is just, I don't know, that's just unfair in my opinion, They booked their own precious time to get on the call. So let's just do the best out of it, regardless of the outcome, really, at the end of the day.
Yeah, you're acting from service, man. I resonate with that for sure.
Yeah, I mean that's I've been on different accounts and people do that where they still have empty space on their calendar, but because they see a +91 from the lead source, they'll be like, hey, I don't think it's gonna work out. For those of us, let's say +91 is India, because obviously the average income there is about $200 a month. Me personally, I just took those people because, dude, I had some people, I'm not gonna name any names, where I was selling, and then they would cancel the call, and then they'll send a team booking link. So they don't take the call, but the team takes it. They'll land on my calendar, but I'll still sell them because I think on 7th level, I sold the most amount of Indian leads out of team total. Because I was just like, hey, how can you get the money? Ask your dad, ask your son, who you got? Look, let's do this, right? Ask your company. But before up, because they're about to kick us out, you said you need to be able to hunt, right? And this is what a lot of closers don't take advantage of, which is in the CRM, a lot of times there's opportunity sitting there, right? Because obviously you let the lost revenue department at 7th level, like you're leveraging like smart views like smart views basically like a list of leads of certain segments, like people who got denied funding, so on and so forth, right? So like a broad level overview, if someone's like, hey, I want more calls on my calendar, I think there's something in the CRM, what can they do to create more opportunities for themselves?
It's a good one. Like, obviously it needs to think about the infrastructure. But I would say if I was to focus on three different things, one of them is if you're not tracking your objections off the first call, it's going to be very hard for you to send certain types of information to different types of people, so that instead of blast emailing people, you can send relevant contextual objection emails or something about funding, about time, about thinking about it, or fear, right? So that's one that's super easy. And then I think I kind of mentioned this one earlier, is go look at all your viable leads, people that you have already presented to and haven't moved forward, but aren't bridges burned yet, and look at how many of them don't have a next action. Like, then set all of them. And some of them you might be like, oh yeah, this person's dead. Great. But it's like, find those people that don't have next actions that you have already presented to. And then the last one is another easy low-hanging fruit, is look at the last communication date. Like, if any viable lead hasn't been communicated with over 60 days, 30 days, like, it's probably due for a type of communication, right? And so like that could be an easy way of just finding some stuff that's pretty much like sitting there easily to kind of go after and start hunting from there. But
Fire.
we can rabbit hole for sure.
No, for sure. No, the fire, man. So let's say someone wants to learn more about this, because you have your company now, right? That you go into businesses and you help with this kind of stuff. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so like what we're doing is like the system is called Hades, which stands for High Activity Dynamic Expansion Systems. And so what you're looking at is like, we go in, kind of look at almost like an audit of the CRM, figuring out where things are leaking or conversion is kind of like slowing down because of like drop off, and do a bit of a lost revenue kind of audit. And then from there, we try and either plug some of the holes using automation or CRM infrastructure, or we come up with more strategies of how we're going to release the lost revenue. And then we're helping kind of train, some of the sales teams in some of how to do the follow-up, so that, great, now they know where the lists are, but it's like, you still need to talk to the people on the phone. You still need to tie up the conversation, right? And so I realized to get more out of the follow-up systems that we're putting into businesses, we need to also like help the sales reps like learn how to do the follow-up as well. So that's what we've been focusing on as well.
Okay. So if people want to find out more about, hey, this sounds cool, like I want to learn more about that, where can they go find you?
Yeah, we're right now in website R&D mode. So hit me up on Facebook or Instagram with the easiest place, and things will be accelerating soon. So here to help.
Amazing. So we'll link Will's socials in the description box below. Will, thank you so much for coming on, dropping some fire.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to add?
No, that was absolutely fire. And like, I mean, a lot of people get caught up with objection handling. I'm one of those guys also. But also at the same time, like, why not just do both? Objection handling plus follow up the right way. I mean, you can make a lot of money with that, So
Like that's the thing. You just pull more people through. Why wouldn't you?
it's an MMA sport at the end of the day. Just learn everything, you know, and just do everything. Why does it have to be 1 versus 1? You know, it's just everything at the end of the day. You know?
100%. Yeah. There you go. So it's not a versus thing, it's a tool thing. So, well, thank you so much. If you enjoyed this episode, smash that like button, subscribe, share it to your homies that could use some of the follow-up juice. You know what I mean? And we'll see you in the next episode. Peace.